This is the Work at Home Heroes podcast. Your host, Caitlin Pyle, digs deep with people from all over the world who make money from home. Get ready to wake up to a world of possibility for freedom, flexibility, and a life you'll love.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Work at Home Heroes podcast. I'm here with Alys Sink, and she's a small business owner, writer, and editor. Alys previously worked as a proposal analyst in Washington, D.C. before losing that position in the 2013 government shutdown. Fed up with the recession job market, she started her own online consultancy business that same year. We're going to get into what that is. So if you're shaking in your boots over new words like I was 10 minutes ago, we're going to get into it. So don't worry. Elyse is now the owner of an online English language tutoring service and editing agency that serves a wide demographic of professionals from all across the world. Welcome to Work at Home Heroes, Elyse.
Thank you for having me.
Where are you joining us from today? I'm in Orlando.
I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia.
All right. So we're both in the Eastern time zone. Are you guys on Eastern time there?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So let's dive into who Elyse was before she got started working at home, and then we'll get into all that fun stuff that everybody wants to hear.
Sure. So before I started this business, I actually was working as a proposal analyst in DC, and a lot of that is working with government proposals. Mine was focusing on the FAA, or Federal Aviation Agency. And so it was a lot of late nights working in conference rooms and just churning out document after document. So that was what I was doing before I started this agency.
Wow. And so in your application, we have all of our guests fill out an application. You mentioned that when you moved to DC, you had $600 in your pocket, and that was it. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I had received a scholarship that was $600, and that was all that I actually had to my name. And I grew up in a very low income area, so it wasn't like I could go home and live with my parents and actually find work. I needed to go somewhere where I could find work. So when I graduated, I had a barista position and $600 and a friend who let me live with her for a short time. And it was a very difficult period of time. It's a very long story, but I ended up getting my proposal position because I went to a Finnish jazz concert and met a gentleman who worked with proposals, and we ended up talking, and I got the position the next day.
What? So, that's called networking, people. You're tuning in. Networking, very authentic. I love it.
It was a very strange happenstance, and I was very lucky in that situation. But I did lose that job after about a year and a half because of the shutdown. And from that point, I bounced between different temporary positions, and I just got really fed up and tired. I think a lot of older millennials feel the same way, where I just became very tired of looking for permission and decided to just do the thing.
Yeah. Yep. I can totally relate to that. And I know a lot of people listening can relate to the feeling like your location is a barrier. And now you live in Virginia, which is, close to DC, but you don't have to live there to make money, right? Now you know that.
Right.
And so let's get into what you're doing now. We mentioned in the intro, you're writer, editor, and language tutor. So let's talk a little bit more about the day-to-day work of Elyse.
Yeah. So a lot of my clients I have built up over time. And so my day usually starts, I get up at 6 a.m. if I am able. Every day is perfect, of course, but I try to get up at 6 and stretch, do yoga, do whatever my body is ready to do that morning, make coffee, and then I start teaching. A lot of my lessons start at 7. So I work from 7 until about noon, and it depends on the day. Some days are definitely busier than others. I do have some outside editing clients. I have clients who I've worked with before, either in my graduate school or just when I was still in DC. And again, a lot of this is word of mouth. I teach all morning. In the afternoon, I sit down, I look at what projects I'm working on. I work on those projects, and then I try to shut down in the evening by 6 o'clock if I can, unless I have something that's running me later. So that's what my day looks like.
And how did you get into tutoring?
This was one of the part-time positions I had while I was in DC. It was actually one of the reasons why I ended up at the embassy and worked as a proposal analyst, was because I started working online as a tutor for an online teaching school who was working with students from Japan. And one of the girls that was also a tutor there wanted to go to the embassy. So it was a strange amalgamation of the things coming together. So I really enjoyed doing that work. I found that I was good at it and that I was able to actually grow as a professional by doing that work. And one thing led to another, and here we are.
I love it. And we emphasize a lot using things in our past, things that got us where we are right now as stepping stones. And so I'm relieved to hear that you look at that, even though, it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to initially with the government shutdown. Like nobody really wishes for that to happen, right? But it got you to where you are now, and you're using those skills to do what you do now. And what about like the writing and editing? Was that something that you were naturally good at growing up, and it's just something that you progressed into naturally, or?
Writing has always been something that I loved doing, even when I was very young. I wrote my first book when I was 4 years old. So I really enjoy writing. It's something that I continue to do. And I went to school as an undergrad for creative writing. That was my focus. And I still enjoy doing that. That is something that I will continue doing always. But yeah, I also enjoy writing in different styles and different voices. And I think proposal writing, grant writing, all of those require different skill sets, requires you to adapt to audience. And that's something that I find I am good at and something that I enjoy doing. So I continue doing those projects, but it isn't the main focus of my business. My main focus is definitely working with international students and students also within the United States, but language learners who are academic or business professionals.
Got it. And so have you been at this since the government shutdown in 2013, or did you not start this until when?
No, so I did start taking on independent clients in 2013, but I won't say that my business really took off until I started graduate school. And that was because I recognized that I would need to support myself through graduate school and that I needed to really prioritize my time and focus. I sat down, I made a business plan and looked at the students that I have now, what is the most profitable and what is the most fulfilling, and what can I realistically do with the schedule that graduate school demands. And so after doing that, I was able to really hone down what is my focus, what services am I providing, and what is my time frame for my business.
Got it. So are you in grad school right now?
I graduated in May last year.
Oh, congratulations. That feels
good. Thank you. It does feel good to be done with it. Absolutely.
So your business right now is your main focus and you're working on growing that at the moment, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really exciting time for me because I am bringing on consultants right now. We have reached the point where I am at capacity. So I need to bring on more consultants to meet the demand.
And your business is growing, you're bringing on some new people. What kind of income are you generating each month for you personally, not just what the business generates, but for you personally?
Sure. So my base income every month that I can expect to make is $1,000, but higher than that would be $1,500. I think my best has been at $2,000, and it really depends on the student. It depends on whether or not a student gets sick or is pregnant or is in an area where internet connection isn't so good. So it can really dip and rise depending on the client.
Got it. Cool. And do you have plans in place when you're bringing on these consultants? And does that mean that you're going to be sending students to them and then you're generating part of the profit, or how does that work?
Sure. So right now, the plan is that I will be gathering students and disseminating them to different tutors who I think would be good partners for them, because the focus of my program is that I try to find a language partner who works with you specifically on the challenges that you're facing as a professional working in another language. So my goal is to look at the student and work with the student and interview them, and then give them to the consultant that I think would work best with them. And then I receive a small portion of their payment for a sort of a finding fee or curriculum fee, because I also provide some basic curriculum to my consultants to use to work with the students, because we do have a method. So that is the plan right now.
Very, very cool. Well, you sound really, really happy. And I'm wondering if you were extremely happy when you first started, or were there some obstacles that kind of popped up in terms of your confidence? I hear the confidence in your voice now, but I'm wondering if it was always there. So tell us about that. What was it like when you first got started?
I'm glad you hear confidence in my voice now, because it is not always like that. No. When I first started, it was definitely I'm trying to think of a way to say it nicely other than it was desperation. I needed to support myself. I needed to support my partner. It was just definitely a moment where I was saying, F it, I need to do this. It was terrifying, absolutely. And I'm still terrified. There are definitely days where I want to put on a hoodie and curl up and just hide in bed. But those feelings really I just sit with them and they end up blossoming into, okay, this isn't going to solve the problem. And I need to get up and find a way to solve the problem. So definitely starting out, very terrifying. And it continues to be terrifying, but in a very productive and, a motivating way, I guess, is the best way that I can describe it.
You touched on something. I have the same problem. When I lay in bed and I think about all the problems and how annoying those problems are, when the reality, I forget every morning, the reality is they get up and solve those problems, my mood will change. And so it's not a lack of problems. I think our biggest problem is us expecting, and I'm guilty of this just as much as anyone else, expecting or not wanting to have any problems. And so we try to get rid of all these problems, and then just more problems come up. We don't realize that it's not the destination that we're seeking. We need to generate happiness through achievement, solving those problems. That's really where the good stuff is. So we talked about self-doubt and being terrified, and, every day, everything I create, I feel the same amount of terror as I did from when I first started. And I think, on your application, you listed some specific thoughts that I know I've had them. I was reading them like, yep, I think that too. Everybody says some thoughts like, who am I to think I can do this? I need to get a real job. My partner needs somebody who has a real job. How could I ever ask anyone to pay for my time and my work? Am I even valuable? No one wants to work with some poor kid from the middle of, I'm not going to say what you wrote, middle of nowhere. We'll just call it the middle of nowhere. And I can relate. I grew up kind of in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't the most popular kid in school. I was a super nerd, brown noser. One of these days I'm going to go public with my 6th grade school picture.
Nice.
Because things have changed a lot since 6th grade. And I was probably the least popular kid in school. My mom was super involved in the PTA, and anybody in my 6th grade class would have taken one look at me and said, yeah, she's probably going into IT, which is not anything that's, to be ashamed of, but just like a super nerdy job, whatever. And so I get PMs on a daily basis, or at least a weekly basis, from my past that they're like, I'm not sure if you remember me. I'm like, yeah, I remember you. You didn't pay me a darn lick of attention in my formative years. And now you want me to undo some of that stuff for you and help you and all this stuff. And I was like, you suck. And I don't have time for this crap. Like, you shouldn't have been a jerk in 6th grade. I don't know. But people are mean in 6th grade. And so, but it kind of sticks with you. And those kind of stories actually, I believe, set you up for thinking those things to yourself for the rest of your life. I mean, what kind of stuff did people tell you in 6th, 7th, 8th grade? And I talk about middle school a lot because that was when it happened for me, when somebody came up to me and they're like, what are you doing? Like, nobody wants to be your friend. Like, you think everybody likes you? Nobody likes you. Like, this girl, Kathy, said this to me when I was in between 7th and 8th grade. She said that to me. And so I think those kind of things, when we're that formative and people can speak into our lives and we're just like very moldable, those kinds of things can just stick with you and carry on into your life as you grow older. And so I'm always encouraging people in Work at Home Heroes community to think about, what stories have you been telling yourself and why do you believe them? Where do they originate? When you can figure that out, then it's so much easier. And I always say awareness is curative. It's so much easier when you realize, hey, what's going on? This is why I'm thinking this way, to just throw it out, identify it for the garbage that it is. And it's really that's all it is, garbage. So just identify that and just get it out of your life. And then, whoa, like you feel so much lighter. You can actually go and do the things that you want to do. And you are valuable. And everybody listening to this right now, you have valuable skills. If you don't have them, you have the skill to learn skills. Everybody has that skill. We all have brains if you're listening to this right now. I don't know, until 2 months ago, I didn't even know how to find a podcast without Googling it. Like, I didn't know how to go to iTunes and look it all up. And so I learned how to do that. And now I have a podcast. And so if you have a skill to listen to a podcast, then you have a skill that you can develop into other valuable skills that can help solve people's problems, which is exactly what Elyse is doing in her business. Something that was really, really interesting on your application that I want to quote. I asked you what past job experience or skills you feel helped you on your work at home path. And you said poverty was a great teacher. So I'm going to ask you to explain that a little bit. It was really impactful for me.
Sure, of course. So growing up wasn't the easiest. My mother worked 3 jobs. My father was fairly absent. And so you really learn to adapt. So when you're growing up in a context that isn't ideal, when you're growing up in an area that is in the middle of nowhere. And I'm listening to you talk about middle school and high school. It wasn't a fun time for me either. But all of those contexts taught me to be adaptable. They taught me to be able to deal with difficult people and with difficult situations. And I find myself being more resilient because of it. And so I know that definitely it wasn't just me. I, of course, have a lot of friends and mentors now, but I think that type of resiliency that you learn by going through a difficult experience or by going through these difficult experiences reminds you that things can be worse.
Oh, yeah.
Things can be so much worse. I think I was listening to one of your earlier podcasts talking about how you're not going to live under a bridge. And I actually had that exact conversation with a friend who I was telling them when I was in college, I was so proud that I had my own car that I had purchased, because if I ever was in a situation where I wasn't able to support myself or find housing, I could live in my car. And he looked at me and he said, you could just live with us for a little while. You don't have to live in your car. And it just, it struck me and reminded me that I'm not alone, that I have built a support network. And I think that people need to be looking for those types of people in their lives to build that support network of people you trust, that you're not alone, you're not doing this alone, and you're not going to live under a bridge as long as you have that support network that you've built up. We moved a little bit from your original question, but
it's all connected. I mean, speaking of connected, I'm just thinking about those stepping stones, all these things that have happened in your past, and you have such a positive attitude about them. And that's something that I like to encourage the Work at Home Heroes community with is if you've got crap that's happened in your past, if you've made mistakes, if you don't like where you live, if you had too many kids, whatever your problem that you're telling yourself you have, you're using that as a reason. Look at them as stepping stones. Look at them as assets, part of your story, and you've got a crazy story, Elyse, but you've come back from that. You're working with it. You have a great positive attitude. You're not going to live under a bridge. You're surrounding yourself with positive people. How's this for a segue? Not all of those people in your life are positive. So my next question, on your journey, your stepping stone journey, have you had to deal with unsolicited feedback from maybe some not so nice friends or family, or maybe some well-intentioned friends and family? And how did you navigate through that?
Sure. Absolutely. I definitely have received unsolicited feedback and judgment from members of my own family, maybe well-intentioned friends. And dealing with that, I've learned to take it with a grain of salt. People always think that they are able to see your life, that they can see the entirety of who you are, and they can't. And you take whatever the feedback is, whatever the negativity is. And I really do want to take it and look at it and say, is this actually applicable? Is this something that I can use to make myself better and to improve myself? And if I'm honest with myself and I look at it and no, there really isn't anything there except negativity, then I ditch it. And so I've worked really hard to do that because I do tend to take things to heart. I do tend to take things very seriously and try to take on that negativity. And instead, recently, I've been trying to surround myself with mentors who can also be objective and look at that feedback and say, no, actually, here's what we can take out of that and here's what we can ditch. So that is how I've navigated through some of that negative feedback. But it's also okay sometimes to just be like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, that's my favorite response. Like, oh, whatever. Or just watch. I like to say, just watch. And, early on when you're brand new, and that's why I always ask this question about unsolicited feedback, because early on when you're brand new, you don't know what you're doing. I didn't know what I was doing. So when I heard older, wiser, quote unquote, wiser people tell me advice that they thought that I should take, I kind of gave them more than a grain of salt. I gave them like a jar of salt, and I was like, maybe they're right. Maybe I should just give up because it's hard right now. And like, I remember when, Transcribe Anywhere, my friend Janet and I, we were launching that in January, and we hit a little snag a few weeks in, and my father-in-law looks me in the face and he's like, well, maybe it wasn't what you thought it was going to be. And, at least already. And I'm like, it's 2 weeks in. Now, looking back at that, I'm like, it was 2 weeks in. But I was smart enough at that point to just kind of brush it off, because it's like, it's way, way too early to just throw in the towel just because we hit one snag. And so many people use that one snag. And I like to call it the dip. And I think Seth Godin calls it that as well. And his book, which I have not read, but I have heard it's highly recommended. We start new projects, we're really excited, right? And then it gets hard, and that's called the dip. And some people have called it the chasm, where you have to jump over the chasm, build a bridge to get over the chasm, whatever you need to do to get over the chasm. So many people just look at that and they're like, no. And they turn back and they go home and nothing changes. They go back to or they say they failed, right? And the reality is they just decided to not get over the dip. They decided to not go over the chasm. They gave up. They didn't fail. They gave up. Another thing that stuck out on your application that's related to this was you have a really concrete suggestion about surrounding yourself with specifically 3 people that you admire and respect, and you called it the Powerhouse 3. Can you tell us about what that is?
Yeah. So this goes back to going through some of that negative feedback. And I found, especially when I was trying to expand my business, I found that I was running into a lot of chasms. And I was running into, how do I do this? How do I actually deconstruct this and approach this problem in an efficient way? And so I came across this idea that I can surround myself with people who will keep me accountable. And so I have 3 people who are not in my field, who are outside of what I do, and can be objective, and that I admire and that I see as their own powerhouses. They are doing something that I can't even imagine how they do it. And they agreed to meet with me once a month, and we share where we're at, and we keep each other accountable. So we sit down, we talk about the things that we accomplished that month, the things that we would like to accomplish next month, and our challenges, our chasms. What are we running into? And sometimes we try to find ways that we can help each other get through that specific sticky spot. And so far, it's been amazing.
I love it. I think that the power of 3, or, the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, there's so many ways to put it, but surround yourself with people who believe in what you're doing. Maybe they don't understand what they're doing, but they believe in you, right? Right. So they don't have to necessarily understand how it all works or understand every aspect of your business. Nobody's ever going to understand that better than you anyway. But just surrounding yourself with positive people that you respect and that respect you, and just comparing notes, circling the wagons type thing, where you just feed off of each other's energy and you help each other through challenges and just be positive influences in each other's lives. Especially if those of you guys are listening at home, maybe you're in a situation where you don't have support at home in your immediate sphere of influence. You can go out and create that sphere of influence. You can find people. I just heard that there's going to be a work at home school / work at home heroes meetup in Seattle. I'm not even going to be there. They just decided to do it, and they're creating this network of themselves. And I'm just super proud to see that. And so you can go out and create things that you don't have. Same thing with, if you don't have skills that you want to use to work at home, you can go out and learn new skills, put new stuff in your brain. What is going to happen to your life when you do that? Just ask yourself that question. But I'm not here to ask the audience questions. I'm here to ask you questions, Elyse. So what is next for you? Do you have any measures in place to make sure that your business is growing, or like with these new people that you're bringing on? Let's ask you, the next 5 years, where do you see yourself?
Right. So the next 5 years, I'm hoping that I am able to have a regular stable of consultants, hopefully employees by that point. I would like to be able to pay the people that I'm working with a living wage. I would like to be able to give them health insurance. I would like to be able to get to the point where I'm able to pay all of my bills regularly, pay off my student loans, and create a program that is really practical and useful for the clients that I'm working with. Because I feel like a lot of the language programs that I have worked with, that I have seen in the past, are very linear, they are very academic, and they don't actually work with students or focus on students to solve the problems that they face every day. Because sometimes a student just wants to know how to do a Starbucks order. There are very real problems that they need to address. So I'm hoping that in the next 5 years that I am large enough and the program is successful enough that I'm able to really help more students and have established relationships, maybe with brick and mortar institutions like universities, maybe other organizations like hospitals that have these language professionals who are really looking for language partners. The need is very present, and that is a need that we can meet. That is my goal.
Absolutely. I really respect that, especially what you'd said about how traditional language programs are very academic. And I'm pretty sure, you'll probably agree with me, pretty sure that the academic language programs are why nobody remembers Spanish from high school.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I didn't even take Spanish because I knew I wouldn't remember it. I took German instead because I had a very strong connection to Germany with family there and just in my background and stuff. So I was able to actually learn it. Didn't really get fluent in it until I lived there for a few semesters, but I can only imagine if I just followed the book. I mean, I'm just thinking back, like a lot of the stuff that I learned how to say that I collect stamps, and like, I don't collect stamps. So why did I learn that? But yeah, it would have been nice to be like, how do I place a Chick-fil-A order? You know, because I was really into Chick-fil-A in high school. Ironically, now I'm a vegetarian, but back then it would have been really useful. Like, how do I do that in Spanish? And in the Orlando, Central Florida area, there's a lot of Spanish speaking people. It's a great place to practice. And it would probably make the Chick-fil-A person at the window very happy to be able to connect that way. So anyway, last question. Man, this has just flown by, Elyse, but I want to know, this is a question I ask everybody at the end of every episode. What advice would you give to someone who wants to work at home but is scared to get started?
You can do it. Really, you can do it. You don't need to look for permission. There is no one who is going to come into your house and say, today's the day, go do the thing. You can actually do this thing. It can seem overwhelming. It can seem like you don't have the money or the time to do it. But if you really sit down and you think about every small step, just the first small step, and you do that thing, the momentum builds. And then before you know it, you're actually at the top of the mountain looking down and thinking, okay, I may not be where I want to be yet, but I am way closer than I was however many months or weeks or years ago. So absolutely, you don't need a lot of money. You just need to commit to it and actually do the thing.
Yeah, I think the key words for me there were that you don't need permission. And I dare say that our time in the public school system, most of us, right, we are conditioned to ask for permission to do everything. And there's really never a point in that transition from getting out of school. Maybe we go to college and you don't really have to ask for permission to go to the bathroom in college, but we don't really have, there's no news announcement. There's no email in our inbox. There's no thing that pops up on Facebook. Maybe there should be that says, hey, guess what? You don't have to ask permission to live your life anymore. You get to make the decision. And yeah, you don't need to be perfect. You don't have to have a lot of money. I mean, just having you on the show, talking about your background and seeing where you've come, like you're on a bus that's moving. And then when you get to where you're going, you can regroup, you can get new advice. I mean, that's what you're doing now. You're bringing on new people and you are making progress. And you said you get that momentum when you take that very first step. But so many people are afraid to take that very first step. So it's just a small step. You don't have to do everything in one day. I often say that if I set out with a goal 3 years and change ago that I was going to have a multi-million-dollar media company, I would have never started. I never would have started. But if I said to myself, I'm going to make $700 a month teaching people how to proofread transcripts to court reporters one-on-one. And that's what I started out doing. I got started and I wrote a 30-page ebook that was terrible, but I got started. I didn't know anything else was possible, but you create this snowball and you don't get any traction without action. So that's what I want to leave you guys with today. Elyse, where can people reach you if they have questions and they'd like to follow up with you?
Absolutely. So we now have a website. It's alyssink.com, ALYSSINK. You can also reach me at alyssink@gmail.com.
Awesome. And she's also inside the Work at Home Heroes Facebook group. You guys can find the dedicated thread to ask Elyse questions about her background, her episode, anything she mentioned or didn't mention that you want to ask her about. You can find her within the Work at Home Heroes Facebook group. We'll see you in the group. And thanks so much for joining us on the Work at Home Heroes podcast, Elyse.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Work at Home Heroes podcast with Caitlin Pyle. Be sure to listen to previous episodes at caitlinpyle.co/podcast. While you're there, read the show notes and check out all the great links and resources mentioned in this episode and more. You can also subscribe to the Work at Home Heroes podcast so you'll automatically be notified when our next episode is available. Remember, as Caitlin says, mo skills means mo money.